Hi, and welcome to Divorce Hacker. I'm your host, Ann Grant. On this show, we'll have a variety of guests who've been through divorce and are experts on the topic. Whether you're thinking about a divorce, in the midst of it, or already divorced, we are here to share our stories with you in the hope that you may relate, learn, process, and overcome whatever you're experiencing in your life. Shannon Ryan is a certified financial planner, a TEDx speaker, author, and she is a nationally recognized behavioral finance advocate. Her TEDx talk, Confronting Your Financial Scar Tissue, explores how personal experiences, beliefs, and emotional patterns shape financial decision-making and long-term wealth behaviors. In fall of 2025, Shannon released her book, Your Money Has Feelings, which explores the hidden emotional drivers behind financial behaviors and offers a more human-centered approach to wealth, healing, and financial decision-making. She is the founder of The Heavy Purse, a platform focused on the intersection of money, emotions, and human behavior. She's appeared on national media outlets including Good Morning America, CNBC, and PBS, and she's been invited to the White House in recognition for her work supporting financial issues impacting women. We are so excited to have her on the Divorce Hacker podcast today. Shannon, we're so glad to have you as a guest on the Divorce Hacker podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. So, what originally drew you into helping people navigate finance?
Oh, Anne, I was one of those strange kids that was fascinated with money, but not in the way that you would think. I grew up in a family that my father has been divorced and remarried 3 times. My mother has been divorced and remarried 5 times. I got to witness up close and personal how money was weaponized through divorces. And I became fascinated around money and its emotional impact on people and why they reacted to it the way that they did. And that started at a really young age. And it carried into my career as I started to work with people and their money. And I saw that there were wounds not only from divorce, but from just life experiences that were impacting their money. And that's what has led me to really focusing on the behavioral side of money in my financial planning practice.
So, what advice would you have for a woman who's going through a divorce? She's not currently working. She's dependent upon her husband. She's now going to be in a situation where she'll receive some spousal support. She very much wants to stay in her lovely the family home. But you know from looking at her finances that she's going to be very cash strapped if she does that. How would you work with someone like that?
I think it's a very common situation. What happens is divorce is emotional, but it's also a business transaction. And we need to refocus our thoughts, not only around wanting to make sure that we keep everything steady for the kids, because so often staying in the family home has all of the memories and the foundation, and everything has been shaken to its core through the divorce. And most women don't want to change that. They want to keep that steady ground, even at the cost of their future financial health. What I would say is start by not making any additional big changes at the moment. But the process that we would go through is taking a look at all of the finances post the divorce. What is most important to that woman and her family? And then creating a financial plan. And it may be that you hold on to the house for a period of time because of the school systems, get the children through the schools, and then make a different choice that is in alignment with her future goals around money and rebuilding that foundation for herself financially.
So in my practice, we often encounter this situation, and that's what we typically do, often working hand in hand with someone like you, is we will analyze the support they're getting, the asset base, the community property interest that she will receive, and then extrapolate it out over the period of her lifetime to see how long that will last her. And what we often find is that like you said, it makes sense for her to remain in the family home till the youngest child ages out and goes to college. Sometimes they can stay and want to stay in the home so that child can come home and experience the holidays in the family home. But in the market that we've been in over the last decade and even longer, homes are appreciating in this area. And so it's also appealing to the husband in that situation because he has an appreciating asset, which later the net proceeds can be divided between them. So that's often a very desirable outcome and a win-win for everyone, both parties and the children.
And I agree. And, I think I know that you see this every day, but I see it in my practice as well. There's an assumption that everything has to be divided right now, meaning that retirement assets have to be divided right now. The home has to be divided right now. And maintaining equity or a piece of a deferred compensation plan to be divided once somebody retires, or a home, actually the assets to be divided once it's sold, is something that happens in divorce all the time. But unfortunately, when there is power struggles, somebody wants to hurt the other person. I don't want you to stay in the house because that'll make you happy, so you need to buy me out now, and that person can't afford to. We start to become limited in what we see as our options, and there are a lot more options than we actually identify in that emotional state. And that's how somebody like yourself who's working through the divorce, if they're looking like you do at the comprehensive approach, you come up with strategies that really can meet the needs of everybody involved.
And it's always so enjoyable to work with someone like you because, we're lawyers, but you specialize in this sort of analysis. And so, we can work with you in running scenarios of stay in the house for X number of years versus Y number of years. Also, I think it's helpful where if someone's been out of the workforce, we can encourage them to do something that they're interested in. If they need additional training, obtain it, get back into the workforce, generate some of their own income, and then their need to rely upon the other party starts to diminish. And my experience in working with clients is that sense of empowerment is really, really so beneficial to them. Do you find that as well?
I agree. But there's this initial, came back to the emotional, there's this initial gut reaction. I'll never live the same lifestyle. I will never be able to make it back at this age. I won't have the financial things that I dreamed of. And there is something so powerful. And I see this transition as emotional response to the divorce, which is such a large life event. And it's natural to have an emotional response. And sometimes fear. Find that often women haven't been involved in the finances as much as they may have wanted to. Either they abdicated it to their husbands because they just weren't interested. Even my own sister told me once that ignorance was bliss when it came to money. So sometimes we really feel that way. We want somebody else to handle it for us. And there's this panic of, oh my goodness, now it's on me. But I see it come full circle when we start to help women become empowered around their money. First of all, money is not as difficult as we think it is. So we can help people hand in hand really understand where they stand and where they want to go. And second of all, we can make a shift from you need to rely on somebody to let's get you financially stable and independent on your own 2 feet. And then you get to choose whether you're back in a relationship or not. But I find that women absolutely love finding this independence and this autonomy to say, I may be married again, I may not, but I am going to be just fine and achieve all of my goals. And it takes time to get there, but 9 times out of 10, we can get women there. And it is so fun to be a part of that journey with them.
It's remarkable. I think the work you're doing is so incredibly important. and dovetails with the work that I do. And I share your enthusiasm at helping them become financially independent so they know they have choices. They can step out of their fear. They can feel empowered to, the numbers tell the story. I'm working with a couple right now where, what we've been talking about is precisely what's going on for her. And she just is, I think, terrified about losing the family home. And when I expressed to her this notion of a deferred sale of the house after the youngest child leaves for college, I could just sense, and it's a mediation, so I'm working with both the husband and the wife, that the tension just evaporated. And he's in a position where, in that mediation setting, he wants to be generous and do the right thing.
That's nice.
And so, sadly, as we know, that's not always the case. There are instances where people are so hurt that they use the children or the home or the finances as a weapon. And of course, that never ends well for anyone when that occurs. So what do you do when you're first brought in with someone like the gal we just talked about, who's feeling scared and frightened and afraid that she's going to lose the family home and hasn't worked in decades? How do you work with her in a concrete way to help her start to feel grounded around when she doesn't know what's going on with the finances and she's residing in a place of fear?
Yeah. So the first thing is often when somebody is there, they'll come into my office with a stack of papers. They'll have an understanding with their attorney what they're going to end up with after the divorce. And they'll walk and say, okay, here's what I have. And I'm terrified. And I haven't been handling the money. And I should have stayed involved. I should have kept my job. And there's all of this I could have, why didn't I? And it is real fear. It's shame. It's a lot of things that they're carrying with them. I almost feel like they come in with a lot of weights on their back. I will typically push aside, which makes people very uncomfortable, what they're getting, and ask them what they really want. And the first response is, what do you mean, what do I want? I can't have what I want. I am here. This is all I have. And I'll repeat the question, what's important to you about money? What are you really in the end? And don't think about how you're going to get there yet. Where are we going? Meaning, what does life look like for you post-divorce with your children and for yourself? What do you want for yourself? And what I find is it opens up an amazing conversation and allows that person to start for the first time thinking about, okay, I'm going to be an independent financial person. What do I want? I don't have to buy the gray rug. I can get a beige rug, or I can get a white rug, or, so I have more choices than I had before because I'm making these decisions myself. So it starts the conversation, and then we'll work into, all right, ASA, this is where we're starting. This is what you have. This is what you want. Where are the gaps? Everyone is different. I mean, we all have different financial situations. Some people may have plenty of money, but they need to make sure that you're directing it in a way that makes them happy and in alignment with their goals. Others may not have enough resources after the divorce to achieve everything they want. So do we adjust expenses? Do we, get another job? Do we get a job at all? So lots of ways of thinking through this. And so many people say, well, I have to go back to work tomorrow. And it's like the home sale. In many cases, you don't have to go back to work tomorrow. Get through the next year or two with the kids. And yes, if you want to do X, Y, and Z, you may need to go back and get a job. And as you said, retrain or rethink about what life looks moving forward. So everything is done in stages. And everything is done thoughtfully based on what that person's trying to accomplish. And that's the key.
I love that. People are so lucky to have you in their court. And I find that too, that oftentimes the guidance they need is to understand they don't have to do everything all at once. Often they'll come in with this, we've been talking about this sort of presenting house issue. And yet you and I know that actually there are many other things that we need to deal with first. Listing the house is not going to happen tomorrow. We need to get our arms around everything, and there may be another way to move through it. And I think having someone like you to give them that confidence is tremendously valuable. So let's talk about a different situation, the situation that it's similar and can be related, where someone finds out there's been what I call financial infidelity within the marriage. So everything seems to be going fine. They've got the house, the 2 kids, the dog, the nice lifestyle. And then all of a sudden one day, um, through whatever means, it's found out that in fact they've been living a lie. The other person has either a gambling problem, a girlfriend. Um, I had a case where someone had another family in South America. I mean, it runs the gamut. And all of a sudden, what they thought was a very happy, stable, secure life is just blown apart. Slightly different, but, more chaotic situation. Have you encountered that? And how do you deal with that situation where, they thought they were set, probably not working or working very much. And all of a sudden, here they are, maybe they're in their mid 50s. So, starting a new career feels extraordinarily daunting. What do you do in that situation?
Well, the first step is this is a highly emotionally charged situation because the first reaction that most people, most normal people, was to go rage at that person. Are you kidding me? You've got a secret family, a secret life. You've been spending money. We haven't been talking about this, or you've gambled everything we have ever had away. Is if we can help the spouse stay quiet and take a moment to think through what this process is going to look like. Because in this situation, typically you're dealing with somebody that has a disorder, a financial disorder, a sexual disorder. There's something that's driving this secretive behavior because this is out of the ordinary behavior. And that's what makes it so shocking. And you want to go to that person immediately and say, what are you doing? How could you be tearing our family apart? I know about the family. I know about the gambling. And in most cases, if we can help somebody become centered and start to gather information before they blow the lid off of it, we put ourselves in a better situation. And it is the hardest thing to do because if you go to that person, they can start hiding, shielding things, changing things quickly. And so I'm not encouraging deception. What I'm saying is keeping your eyes incredibly wide open, staying as measured as possible, and getting as much information as possible before sitting down. And I personally believe I wouldn't sit down with this person directly immediately. I would hire a team. I would hire you. I would hire a financial advisor, and I would hire a therapist, and I would create a team, and I would stay as composed as I possibly can in such a horrible situation and gather as much evidence on what has been going on, what is being spent, how is it being done, before I sat down and had a confrontation about it. The reason being is you're not dealing with a healthy person. You're dealing with somebody that probably has some level of dysfunction or disorder, and you need professionals to help you through it.
Agreed. That's precisely my take on it as well. And there are things we can do legally to protect a person when they find that out. But we do need to do it in an under the radar kind of way, because otherwise I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars just start to evaporate and get moved to offshore accounts. And once that happens, it's much harder to retrieve it. So it's really important that if you suspect that or you start seeing that, in my opinion, they immediately get to a qualified professional who can help them.
Agreed. It's interesting. Many people are not aware about how their accounts are actually titled. So if you've got accounts titled in joint tendency where each person owns that 100%, they can start to drain accounts and do other things legally, and you may never see that money again. So staying as measured as possible and starting the process is important. And it is so difficult. It's easy for us to sit and discuss it, but when it's happening in practice, there's so much emotion. It is incredibly hard to do.
So, what is your advice for someone who has been blindsided by a situation where, despite their best efforts, are going to need to end their marriage? they find themselves in that fight and flight survival mode. They thought that they had several $1,000,000, tucked away in a retirement account and were set, but learned that in fact, either that's not the case or everything's going to get divided in half. And now they've got to start all over. How do you help them build their wealth? We all know about the power of compounding. We all know that we were supposed to start socking $20 away in our 20s.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. A lot of people didn't. I'm the case study of getting divorced and having to start over with nothing in my 50s.
Yeah.
Do you have a strategy to help people rebuild quickly and get money invested so that they can have the life that they've wanted to have and go from surviving to thriving?
Yeah. It depends on each individual case because each case is different. It also depends on the person, if they've been working, if they have a profession, or if they have not been working, they've been out of the workforce. But the first step is to get stable. I had a client whose husband had secretly gambled away everything, and he was creating statements, and she was really trying to stay on top of it, but he was creating statements that were false statements. She still thought that there was retirement money, and he, not to his defense, but to explain his disorder, he thought that the next win, he'd just pay it all back. It was coming back. He wasn't trying to hurt his wife. He had a disorder. He needed some help. He had an addiction. But he kept thinking, okay, next time I hit black, I guess, then I'll repay all the accounts and she won't know. So he had built this straw house that had absolutely gotten blown down. So she actually at one point had found one of the statements. Something didn't quite look right about it. The Fidelity logo or something was off. And so she called the company and she started to slowly realize that there was no money there at all. She was a professional. She had a career. She was actually an attorney. And so after the divorce, it took a lot of time. I mean, it is not something that happens overnight. First step is to make sure all the debt and that you get back on solid ground. He had not only spent all their money, but he had built up some pretty incredible credit card bills that she was on the hook for parts of them. And so the divorce went through. We worked on getting the credit paid off, the part that she had to assume, which wasn't all of it, but she was responsible for some of it. And we needed to rebuild her cash reserves. And that took a couple of years. So sometimes it's not an overnight thing. It takes time to create a stable foundation again. Once that stable foundation is created, then we started to layer in what was most important to her next. The education funds for her kids had been taken out as well. And so she started to layer back on education for the kids, retirement, and so forth. And it just took discipline. It took living well within her means. And over several years, we got her back to a place where she felt very comfortable. And again, it looks different for everyone, and it's not a fast process. Sometimes we just want to feel okay tomorrow. I want this all to go away. I want my accounts to be back tomorrow. And sadly, when there's been this type of deception that occurred in a marriage and this much money that has been lost, it can take a decade to get back. But as long as you're diligent and you're watching everything, which is not necessarily fun, but it does put you back in the driver's seat. There is this satisfaction of I'm in control of my money now that occurs, and you do rebuild back. But it's sometimes slow.
So let's talk about how to avoid this. You pointed out something very important, which I think a lot of people may not know, but during a marriage, any debts incurred by either party, you're on the hook. It's community debt for the most part. There are some ways to get around it, but it's very hard to avoid that. So if you have a spouse who is spending recklessly, if it comes time to get divorced, you're on the hook for the debt, half the debt. And if there's an IRS bill, people are often surprised to know that regardless of who earned the money and who owes, technically in your mind may owe the money, given that they earned the money, you're both on the hook for it. And the IRS will come after whomever has money. So if your husband was gambling and in your mind, he owes the IRS $100,000. If your attorney client, he has no money, but she has $100,000, the IRS will come and take her money. They don't care who is actually responsible for the debt. In their minds, you're on the hook. So every person getting married, in my opinion, should know that and should have very open communication with their potential spouse before tying the knot to avoid the situation that your attorney client and gambling husband found themselves in. Do you have any advice for people that are starting out, that are thinking about getting married? Any conversations that they should have to elucidate some of these issues and deal with them before they become problematic?
I do. I'm a big believer in prenuptial agreements. I actually believe it is transparency in the beginning, where in a prenuptial agreement, you have to put everything on the table. You need to talk through how you think about money, how you want to interact with money. And often people will say, I don't want to do a prenup, Shannon, because I want to assume that the marriage is going to last. And I would say the marriage will last because of the transparency, not because you kept things quiet. So prenuptial agreements often will force people into a transparency conversation. Part of that conversation that I encourage my clients to think about is at least once a year, you as a couple should both be pulling your credit reports, meaning you have every right to look at your spouse's credit report, and they in turn should be looking at your credit report. It's the one place that any debts that you're carrying are going to show up. And that is important to make sure that if they're carrying debt that you don't know about, that credit report is going to show what they're carrying. And so if you're doing that every year, you're going to slow down the surprises. You're not going to know often at the beginning of a marriage some of the habits or the addictions that may come along later in marriage, unless somebody is very aware and then transparent with you. That doesn't happen most of the time. And so putting some safety gaps, writing a prenuptial agreement, making sure that you're checking credit reports every year gives you the ability to keep the transparency throughout the marriage. You should be able to open any mail that comes to your house. You should be able to look at retirement accounts on an annual basis. My husband and I do a financial meeting every year, and it's interesting. He pays all the bills, and because I'm an investment advisor, I do all the investments. And I literally keep a running list of everything we own and where it's at. And not only do I present it to him on a list, I actually get on each one of the accounts and show it to him, because I need him to know where everything is at and how it's invested. But he needs to know where to find it and how to look at it, even if I'm not present, so he can keep me in check as well. And that is transparency. And money transparency is critical for the foundation of a marriage.
That is excellent advice. Yeah, I think if more people did that, fewer people would end up in my office, for sure. Because from my experience, the number one thing that leads people to come to me is not infidelity, surprisingly. It's financial issues. That's the thing that really leads them to no longer be able to be together.
But we're scared to ask. Money is a funny thing. We can turn the TV on and see all kinds of things on TV these days, but for whatever reason, money continues to be one of those taboo topics, not only in society, but with our spouses. And we become afraid. If a spouse is responding to you saying, well, that's my 401k, that's my business, I don't want to share that to you, you won't understand it. Those are all red flags that should stop you and make you dive even deeper, even if you have to do it quietly. Because if they're not showing you or they're hiding something, that is the beginning of a problem. The sooner that you face the problem, the quicker you'll come to a resolution, either through a therapy or where you understand where the problem's happening. The longer you let it go, it gets worse. It doesn't get better. So ignorance is not bliss. It creates big problems inside of a marriage. And you can hide addictions and other things that may need professional help behind a statement that you won't share.
Yeah, another thing in line with that that people may not be aware of is that the law, the statutory code provides that married people are in a fiduciary relationship to one another, and they owe each other a duty of good faith and fair dealing as though they are business partners. And they have an obligation under the law to share with one another potential business opportunities, investments. So, what you just described that you do with your husband is codified in the law, but nobody seems to know that or do that. And I think it's, I mean, I did this. I'm an attorney, but I um, just assumed we were both partners at big law firms making a fair amount of money, that everything was being handled appropriately,
Of course.
and then was found myself really surprised and have made it my life's work to help people going through that. So I'm very sensitized to this issue. But um, I find in the work I do in meeting with people who are candid with me that, it's a spectrum problem, not, you know, it varies the degree to which there's transparency, but there's very often not the kinds of disclosure going on that is happening between you and your husband. And if there was, I think so many more people would stay married and be in good relationships. So when you met each other, did you have these conversations early on when you were dating before you got married and talk about your money philosophy, and were you on the same page, or was like one of you more thrifty than the other, or do you mind sharing
No,
that?
and this goes back to what I shared with you. I came from a very broken, divorced, remarried family. So I saw money weaponized for years by a father who I loved, absolutely adored my father. In fact, the first chapter of my book talks about the divorces and what I learned financially. So I knew a lot of things about myself financially. I knew that I wanted to always work. I needed to stay in control. I needed to earn a living. And when I was married in 1990, there were more women staying home than men. So I had the conversation up front with my husband that I needed transparency, that we would always talk about money, that if someone is going to stay home, if we chose to have kids, could be him, but I wasn't going to leave the workforce. I needed to make sure that I kept my financial independence, even being involved in the marriage. And we have shared our finances. We have the same checking account where all of the money is family money. However, we have had conversations about it from the get-go since we were dating. And most of that was driven by my dysfunction that I learned in my own family and not wanting to repeat those stories. But what I find is that people understand this. They know that's what they should be doing, but life is busy, Annie. People get busy, we get going, and sometimes those conversations don't happen, not because we don't want to. It's because the kids need lunches tomorrow. We need to get our teeth brushed, and we're both working professionals, and he's taking care of it or she's taking care of it. So there are a lot of reasons why these conversations don't happen beyond something happening that shouldn't be happening. Everybody could be doing their very best, but we're just not making time to have these conversations either. And as things go on, if we've allowed one or the other spouse to make all those decisions, questioning them after a year or two or not asking may feel confrontational. So there's a lot of reasons and some healthy reasons why people avoid these conversations as well.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty common when you have a couple of young children and you both are like, starting your careers. It also feels like there's never enough money. You're trying to get a house, then you're trying to get a bigger house. Then, you're trying to save for college. And so there's this feeling like we're just trying to make ends meet. There's no extra cash sloshing around to invest with Shannon.
Right.
What advice do you have for people in that situation, which I think is very common?
It's very common. The most important thing that we can do as humans with our money is align our money with our values and really understand what we want financially. Not what our family wants for us, not what social media says that we should be buying or doing with our money, but what we want to do. And that's more difficult when you're in a marriage because that's two different people coming from two different backgrounds with two different levels of desires. But as a married couple, if you can have a financial meeting a couple times a year and make decisions on how money is spent. I'll give you an example. I had a couple that came into my office, young couple in technology, doing great. They had just purchased their first house, beautiful home, and they were thrilled, but they had really stretched. And in my generation would call it house poor. They just went out and got everything they could get. And when they came in, I pushed their money aside and said, "What do you want? Tell me what's most important to you as a couple financially." And they looked at each other, and the first thing that came out of their mouth was, "We want to travel. We don't have kids yet. We've got a great income. We just want to really go out and adventure." I said, "Outstanding. What do you have scheduled for this year?" And they said, "Well, we bought the house and we're really at our maximum right now. We're hoping for a bonus. We're hoping for the next level of income. And then we'll be able to do what we really want to do." So I started to explore why they had stretched so much for the house. And after a long conversation, it started to become quite evident to me that in their culture, buying a home, the biggest, most expensive home they could, was how they showed their families they were successful. And they were looking for the approval of their parents in this big home that they weren't filling up all the rooms, that was costing them more than they really felt they needed to spend because they weren't able to do anything else. So by the end of the conversation, I said, "Well, sounds like you need to sell the house."
Wow.
And they both, it was this moment where they went, "Ah, really? Can we do that?" I said, "Absolutely, you can. You have agency over your money. And until you align your money with your values, buy a smaller house, go adventure, and do it now." Because the biggest mistake that happens with couples and money is they don't slow down to say, "All right, we only have so much." I mean, the two couples, we've got the kids, we've got the house payment, we're trying to save for education, but they're not making a conscious decision ongoing about how they're spending money and are they aligning it with what's most important to them. Money happiness doesn't come at a certain income level. Now, money does make life more comfortable. Let's be clear. But most of us have enough money flowing through our hands. It's the conscious decisions that we're making about our money that makes the difference. And often we're not making those money decisions consciously. So we're spending money in areas that aren't making us happy. And that causes fights in marriages. There's never enough money. Well, there was, but we decided to do this and it really didn't make us happy. So let's make a different decision. So it's having ongoing conversations as a couple and often facilitated by a financial advisor or somebody that you trust in your life that you can help continue that alignment and having those conversations that at any income level, you can find happiness financially, but you've got to create that alignment.
That is so reassuring. So tell us, where can we find your book, Your Money Has Feelings?
Oh, thank you. Anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
And is it also available as an audiobook?
It is.
Oh, that's
It is.
wonderful.
Yeah, that's how I listen to most of my books these
Yeah.
days, out on a walk or working out or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any other things you'd like to address today that we haven't covered in our conversation?
No, and thank you for having me. It's inspiring to have a conversation with you because of how you work with your clients and the process that you take them through and that you work with financial advisors. And what I love about what you do in your practice is you're not only focused on a divorce, a successful divorce, but what you're focused on is how to get people back on their feet and back to life. And that's a successful divorce.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me.